Hello and welcome into the Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Rue of Big Ten Network, and this week's guests are Rapheal Davis, former Purdue basketball player, and Big Ten Network Manager of Research, Shelton. Let's get into it.
Take a look, listen, and enjoy. Look at here.
With the catch, the finish! Oh, my goodness! What a catch!
Oh,
energy,
my goodness.
enthusiasm. It's picked off! Selfish! Brilliant!
He's still going! Touchdown!
All right, before we get to Rapheal and Harold, first a word from our sponsor, the Northwestern University School of Professional Studies. If you've ever thought about a career in sports, check out the master's program in sports administration at Northwestern University. You can build your skill set and your network in evening or online classes. Find out more at sps.northwestern.edu/sports. As I always say, it's a great opportunity for anyone who wants to work in sports, work at a place like Big Ten Network, to get involved with. Check out that program. I always appreciate their support over the years now. So once again, shout out to NUSPS, and we will get to Rapheal Davis right now, former Purdue basketball player, and talking defense, talking Boilers, talking a lot of basketball. Let's get into it right now. I'm very pleased to be joined by former Purdue basketball player, former Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. It's Rapheal Davis. Ray, how's it going, man?
Going well, man. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you jumping on. Thanks for joining. And off the top, when I get these former players on, especially ones that are, around my age and were in the league 4 or 5 years ago, if you could update the fans just kind of what you've been up to, what your interests have been since graduating. We last saw you on the court. I think we're the same age, so graduated 2016 and transitioned from basketball into the working world. How have things been going for you?
So for me, after graduation, went on a little China tour, played in China for a little bit, ended up rupturing my disc in my back. So obviously basketball was done at that point. So I transitioned into, like you said, the real world. I started working for Eli Lilly. I moved to Atlanta as pharmaceutical rep for Eli Lilly. I did that for 4 years. But this past year, I kind of regained my passion and just my love for the game, but also, just being honest, a lot of my friends I grew up with just aren't here anymore for reasons that, just reasons that then they couldn't, some situations they couldn't control, some situations they couldn't control, but a lot of those guys were better than me athletically. So a big passion came behind how can I do something different in my community. So, in October, I kind of left my job with Eli Lilly, and I've been doing basketball full-time, training, hosting camps, starting a nonprofit foundation for my community, just different things that's around basketball, coaching the AAU team, being a mentor to a few college guys, just different things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I know also you've been, besides your on-court work, you've been getting into the sports media space as well. So definitely, if you could get into that a little bit, talk about where to find your work, because I've seen and heard some of it. It's been real solid. You've been on our platforms as well.
Oh no, I appreciate it. Yeah, so I've also started a podcast, something I've always wanted to do, and now obviously since I was no longer with Eli Lilly, allowed up the free time. A buddy of mine, Dosunmu, he has his own podcast, so kind of inspired me to kind of put my foot down and do my own. But then also, Boiler Up with Rapheal Davis on all streaming platforms, the Rapheal Davis podcast on YouTube, Twitter, Rapheal Davis 3. So we're just building a podcast as much as possible, trying to give flowers to former players, players that I'm fans of. We have a Nard Pollard on the podcast who went to my high school, who's from my side of town, grew up in my community, who went to Purdue like I did, ultimately played in the NFL. So his story will resonate with a lot of people that I grew up with. So it's just doing things like that and just seeing how far we can take it. It's been real cool.
Yeah, saw you've been calling some games as well in your hometown of Fort Wayne for Purdue Fort Wayne. And, as you're trying to venture more into that space and learn on the podcast game and on the play-by-play and color commentary side, who do you try and, I guess, learn from when you apply those skills? I think you have you have big shoes to fill because you got Robbie Hummel, who's a really phenomenal announcer right now, and I assume you use your connections as a former player to kind of learn and learn how to teach and analyze the game as opposed to playing it.
Yeah, so for me, playing for Coach Paint he was big on not only doing something but know why you're doing it and really knowing the details of why you're doing something. So we watched a lot of film, and especially the year I was Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, I would watch the guy I was guarding. I watched 3-4 games of him. So as far as knowing the game, just watching it, I've just been a student of it always. But obviously, I mean, Stephen Bardo, I've talked to him a couple times. I've talked to Rob. I've talked to Doug Gottlieb. He's been a real big help, just kind of getting things going. So, I mean, just a few people that way, but I always try to just do things my way to kind of bring just the real sense to it, try to bring the common fan perspective in a sense, kind of make things simple for fans at home, kind of just see what I see through the player's eyes, but also understand that we're watching it the same and you have to look at it through a film because you can see it that way too a little bit.
Yeah, good network you got there. Steven's my guy at BTN, obviously, former
Good
Illinois
dude.
guy. Yeah, grew up listening to him. So, before we get to some Purdue talk, what was it like playing in China? I got to ask because I read about your, I guess, venture out there before you took it. It was an old article, so I want to know just like what that was like joining that team and going out there for however long it was, a few weeks or a month or so.
I mean, it was cool. I didn't like it. Just being honest. I mean, no, I didn't eat for like the first 2 weeks just because. I mean, maybe I'm just a spoiled American, but I mean, it's not like you got Panda Express over there or like the Chinese spots you used to. So I mean, I ate watermelon fries and broccoli a lot until we saw some steak. I don't know if it was steak, but I think it was me, Linzel Smith, Kalen Lucas, a couple other guys, and it's kind of you act like it's kind of like filet mignon, you just chow it down. So the first couple weeks, I kind of had like an attitude, like you know what I mean. Then I also got hurt out there, so I couldn't play in all the games. So I didn't. For me, basketball was always a family thing. It was always a look up and see my mom in the crowd, see my brother, see my sister, see my dad. One of those things where I wasn't able to see them in the crowd. Wasn't able to. I was a big communicator on the court. Wasn't able to talk to referees. I wasn't able to do certain things. It was just more about at that point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but at that point, it's about getting a check, and that's not really what I want to be in China for. I feel like I could have got a check here, but no, it was cool for what it was. I got to play basketball overseas. Got to play in China. Got to be in China, but I don't think I will move to China.
Food's real different over there, man. I feel you.
Yeah, and food is real important to me. Like it's not. I'm real simple. Like I have to just eat. I don't have to eat real well, but I just have to be full, I guess.
Yeah, I was there for like a week and a half maybe, and by the end, I was so tired of the food. You're right, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
Takes some getting used to. All right, switching over to some Purdue topics now. You came in. I remember this really well. To a Purdue basketball era when the Painter era, I think, was most in doubt. It was kind of teetering, and that's crazy to kind of think about now. But back then, I kind of thought this thing maybe had run its course. It was kind of parallel with another one of those Purdue staffers, Bruce Weber's era at Illinois, that had definitely run its course, and I kind of assumed that maybe Painter was going to follow that same path. You guys struggled in your first couple of years, and you guys dug in and turn that thing around, and the rest is history. Painter can probably be there as long as he wants now. How did you guys do that and get out of those doldrums, because it was looking rough for a while, and now you've won several Big Ten titles since, and it's been real sweet. So take me inside what happened, how'd that whole thing turn around?
I'll say what happened because it wasn't as if Paint had hit a wall or anything. I mean, it was the baby boilers had just left. That last class had just kind of finished out. Rob, Lou Jack, Ryan Smith, they were leaving out. We had DJ Bird, who was the sixth man of the year previously, but he had never been, I guess, in that starting role. Or he'd never been that guy that's expected to go out there and get you 17 a game. Then we had Tyrone Johnson, who was stepping into the kind of from that sophomore to junior role in kind of that leadership role. So, I mean, that freshman year, we didn't have, I mean, we look at it because we lost in the CBI at home, which is it's terrible. But we beat Illinois and Minnesota that year, and both of those teams make the tournament. You know what I mean? So I think we finished in between those teams in the Big Ten race. Just our non-conference was terrible. I mean, Eastern Michigan, I think they stormed the court on us. Like we had 38 points in the college game. It was crazy. But then that next season, we had some guys transfer in. Some guys got older. Some guys got bolder, I would say. And guys just didn't listen to paint. So I always tell people that it was never a paint issue. It was never a thing, because nothing changed from paint really from my sophomore to junior year. It was only the locker room. And it's not saying that, I'll say it. We just got 5 new freshmen. They came in and we had a lot of guys leave out and they just changed the locker room. I mean, if those 5 freshmen come in, they come to their first workout. I think first workout was at probably 6:30 or 7. And all 5 of them get to the gym at 5 in the morning. So they're early to the early time. You know what I mean? So that set the tone for, at the time, our sophomores who were Bryson Scott, Kendall Stevens, Bowser Smotherman. Like, we here. You know what I mean? So, by the end of the season, 4 of those freshmen were starters. So, they set the tone. They allowed me. I was a returning captain, the only one. And also, we had a senior, Neil Bashir's a walk-on. But I guess I was that voice in the locker room. AJ didn't talk much. So they all allowed me to lead. They all allowed me to kind of be the voice in the locker room. They listened very well. They just wanted to get better. They all knew we were last place in Big Ten. I always ask them, like, who commits to go, who signs to the last place team in the conference? Just being honest, just thinking about it. But they all say the same thing. They want to come and be a change agent to the program. So, they showed it from day one. But then also, before that, before John Noctis gets there, we had a great summer. For that first month, we had 5 returning guys on scholarship. Myself, AJ, Basil, Kendall, and Bryson. And we had 5 new freshmen. So for that first few weeks, 5 freshmen versus us. Like, it was a sense of, you want our minutes, come take them. And some of those guys took them. You know what I mean? So it was a sense of, we had that type of competitiveness in the locker room and on the courts. The coaches structured the locker room in a sense. You had young guys and old guys mixture in the way. It's kind of how paint did it. So, it just allowed for great competitiveness, allowed for us to fight all summer, allowed for us to be under the radar in a sense, to just put in the work. But then also John Noctis came after the season started, I think, and we were in practice. And he kind of just changed the swag at Purdue. I know Carson obviously gets a lot of credit for just like the swagger and the tempo he brought to Purdue. But I would say John Noctis kind of started that in a sense, kind of with he's from Miami, came to Indiana, PJ Thompson, all those guys really gravitated towards his style. And he kind of just turned us up in a different way, swag style. But guys just listen in the locker room. We changed, it's a buzzword culture, but we completely changed our culture. We stopped wanting to be cool. We stopped caring about going to frats. We wanted to just win games. And and we had a really, really, I know I'm going longer and longer, my bad, man. But when you think about that year, my junior year, before Christmas, we lose to, I think, Gardner-Webb, Notre Dame, Vandy, and North Florida. So it's like we didn't, like that's before Christmas. So we had a really, really, really tough practice on Christmas break before Minnesota at home. We ended up winning that game at home, kind of got the coaches kind of off our back a little bit, showed us what we could do. They had 2 really good guards, the Hollins, and John Noctis and I kind of did what we should have done on defense. And then from there, we just won some games and we just built our confidence. AJ played really well. The fresh Vince Edwards was really, 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 really big for us. Vince Edwards doesn't get a lot of credit for what he did his freshman year, but he was huge for us to be able to shoulder that responsibility as a freshman.
Yeah, man. John Noctis, I think, brought like all of Miami with that dunk on Indiana. That's what I remember him. I think most fans remember that as well. That's what was like, all right, we're here. And I'm
he knew that dunk. He knew a play against. He said to going into that game. He said we always knew the way that it was pumped. You have a good IU game, you're a legend forever. And he was looking for a play like that. He got it.
Sure. Cool. And you mentioned specific games I'd written down here in these questions, like Notre Dame, Gardner-Webb, because I saw that you called a players only meeting. You were a captain as a sophomore, And like, I'm kind of fascinated by players only meetings, right? Just that vibe. Like, I need to know how that goes, right? Especially if you're an underclassman. Like,
No, I caught that meeting my junior year.
okay,
So I
junior.
was I was a junior, and we did. I think we lost. I don't know who we lost to. It could have been Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb was the one right before Christmas.
So regardless,
But
like you send a group text, like, are you like, man, these guys are about to be pissed off at me, or do you not even care at that point? Like,
oh no, I never cared about that. No, I
right.
never. Like to this day, like I still think about if Ryan Klein likes me, like because he can't. It's no way he could. He was a freshman. I would stand under the clock, and if you was like a second late on the time, 15,000 on the varsity climber, no questions. So I never really cared if dudes was pissed off. It's one of those things where you send a text, meet in the locker room, guys don't really know what's going on, and it's not aggressive. It's not. I mean, you just talk. Everybody get a chance to talk, but then at some point, words, this can't happen again. You know what I mean? It's that tone, and you get your point across, and then we go to Penn State, and we have a terrible first half, and we get in the locker room when I guess we have another players only halftime meeting, and it's one of those talks where I don't know if Paint spoke, because that was one of the times where I didn't really care who was mad at me. I let it go because it felt like the season before. It felt like Gardner Webb happened again, although we had beat Minnesota, whatever. But we ended up having that talk, going out. Kendall Stevens hit a 3 to win that game. But no, players only meetings. It just depended on what was going on. We would have them all. I mean, sometimes we would just chill, play games. We would hang out. But some of them, I mean, they got real intense. Yeah, you just never know.
Yeah, I had Klein on the show like over the summer, I think. So just
that's my dude.
I could ask him first question: do you like Rapheal Davis? You got
that's my guy.
You got to put the freshman, in line. I feel you on that.
He left with two Big Ten championships and the Elite Eight.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. And then kind of speaking of that, I want you to speak to, if you could, the value in sticking around. And I know this has been a topic at Purdue recently with some of the recent departures, and kind of seeing a career through, right, to reap the benefits of that work you put in when things aren't going great. Right. And you thought you became a top 25 team, played in 2 NCAA tournaments, Big Ten tournament championship game. What is the value in seeing this through? In a time when transfers are spiking, and I know Painter's spoken to this very publicly. How do you see it?
For me, it just depends on what's best for your family situation. We come in last place my sophomore year. A lot of guys do transfer out. I wasn't that good. So, I didn't have guys just calling me, asking me if I went to transfer. So, and then I also had a child at the time too. So it was definitely not a time where you could shake things up. I had a daughter. So it was one of those times where Paint has a saying he would say all the time, if you don't like the hole you're in, stop digging. So for me, I didn't like where I was at. So I found out why I wasn't playing. Coach said, you're the worst defender I ever recruited. It's that simple. I got with Gavin Roberts. That May master, I changed my mechanics laterally. Coach Brantley really pushed me defensively that offseason. And for me, it worked out. Because for me, my family situation, my situation, being at Purdue wasn't harming that. It was what I was doing. So I was in control of my own. So when some guys transfer, because, whether it's better for their family or it's better for them, whatever makes sense to you. But for me, sticking it out it brings more value to me when you do stick it out and you fight through hard times, because now I'm a guy that averaged 6-7 points. Purdue, you would think I averaged 15, 17 points, the way Purdue fans admire just the way I played hard. So it's a thing where you stick that out, you win some games, you do it for your coach, you do it for your program. That's what it was about for me. But when guys transfer, it really does. To me, it's all about the program they're in. When they transfer from Purdue, when guys I played with transfer from Purdue because I was there, it never made sense for any guy that transferred from Purdue while I was there. It never made sense, not one time. Because I don't think, maybe once guys left and found a better situation, but I don't think it works out all the time.
So you really went from the worst defender Painter's ever seen to defensive player of the year?
Oh, yeah, like 3 months. It was crazy. But it was I had 4 different high school coaches. So I never really, and I averaged 30 points a game, I would say. So I never really had to play defense. I never was expected to. I never learned how. We would be in practice. We won shell drill. I just look at Paint like I have no idea. Like one thing Paint would always say about me is that if I didn't know something, I would stop and I would ask. And I knew nothing about defense. It was to the point where he couldn't play me. So so even when I won Defensive Player of the Year, like our assistant coaches was still telling me I wasn't playing defense right. Because I was on the ball like guarding like a James Blackman, a Brent Ford, somebody that's run off of screens I could lock into. But my help side wasn't that great. I could just lock into my man. But no, it was one of those things where that motivated me, and I knew I wasn't gonna get the ball as much as AJ. I knew Vince Edwards was really good. So it was one of those things where Coach Brantley would ask me kind of, and it was a pride thing. Coach, and I grew up with a lot of value. I grew up on pride, and I grew up on not letting somebody outdo you in a sense. But Coach Brantley, that Maymaster that summer, even before the freshmen got there, he would say, "Hey Ray, who gonna guard Terran Petway?" He would say that. Who gonna guard Terran Petway? You gonna let a freshman guard him next year? Then he would say, "Hey, that freshman coming in Ohio State, D'Angelo Russ gonna be pretty good. Who gonna check him?" So he would bring up Karis LeVert. He would bring up Sam Decker. You know what I mean? He would bring up DJ Newell from Penn State. So it was a lot of good players that we couldn't put freshmen on. So he would say, "Dang, Ray, if you getting 30 on you every night, we can't play you." It's just your coach telling you this. But I have a great relationship with Coach Brantley. We talk every day, but this is how he's motivating me. So in a sense, where we get to this point, then John Noctius comes, and John Noctius had a big thing of, Ray, these players have names. These are the big players in the league. If we do well against them, we eat off their plate. And I'm a guy, I love to eat off other people's plate and kind of make my own name. That's kind of what I did.
Yeah, I've actually surprisingly only been to one game at Mackey Arena. Like I've been to Purdue a bunch of times, but it was when I was a student, and it was the Purdue-Illinois game 2015, which was a real hype game and a real tale of two halves. Like Illinois came out, had Purdue shook, and then absolutely was
Rice
destroyed. Yeah, you remember the Revonte Rice, Kendrick Nunn, I think lobbed it to him. But like I see why you guys get fired up to play defense there. Like the crowd demands it. That hype video coming in, whose house is like, bone chilling. And
I get goosebumps thinking about that game right now. Because that was one of my favorite games.
Yeah, and then
he was talking trash. It was crazy.
It was a wild environment, and the crowd just feeds on it. So I do see why you guys, really are hungry on defense, especially as opposed to some other, Big Ten teams or arenas I've been to.
I mean, Paint tell you, if you don't play defense, you're not gonna play. So it's one of those things too, where like a guy like me, obviously I wanted basketball to be able to feed my daughter at the time. If I can't feed her from basketball if I'm not playing. So Paint to tell you, if you don't play defense, you won't play. But then also I tell guys being recruited, who doesn't want to go to a school that will give you a standing ovation for diving for a loose ball? Like, who doesn't want to go to a school that gives you a standing ovation that will love you for 20 years for getting some steals? So it's like you go somewhere where you just play hard and the crowd appreciates it. You don't have to go out there and hit 6, 7 threes, dunk on 3 or 4 people, have such high expectations. When your expectation is to play hard, it makes it fun to play at Mackey.
Yeah, and you mentioned Revonte Rice with that dunk. I didn't play against him. He's a couple years older, but he was in my hometown in high school, the other high school. He would do some crazy stuff like that. He dropped the easiest 45 points I've ever seen, effortless one time.
He was really good. No, he was really good. I was surprised that I don't know how. I think he went to Drake or something, but he could really score the ball. So he was one of those dudes where, again, you look at the scouting report, look at the schedule, like that's one. And it's one of those games where he got me that first half, no question. And then that second half, and we kind of flipped it on them. But he was because he was so big. He was so big, so physical, and he was quick, but he could handle the ball. You could tell he grew up playing at the park. So he was one of the tougher ones to guard because of his shiftiness.
You said you don't know how he ended up at Drake. He fell victim to the same thing that Robbie Hummel did. Bruce Weber didn't recruit him, so that's another story. But it's okay. I know Purdue fans like Bruce, so I'm not I'm not gonna bash him or anything.
Bruce beat us at Maui. Bruce beat us in Maui. We were running a 2-3 zone after Kansas State beat us. Payne never ran that 2-3 zone again. Never seen it again. Also that was a big. I forgot to say that. That was a big reason why I started playing defense. Coach Matt Painter implemented a 2-3 zone, which means he had no trust in his guard defense. So that kind of was one of those things where like you had like Lewis Jackson hitting you up like, damn, Purdue don't run zone, y'all weak. So it's like one of those things too. But
yeah, that's unheard of. Lewis Jackson, another guy I saw play in high school. He was insane to watch too. Especially that was the days he did it at Purdue too. That was the days when the shorts were out of control and him being like 5'7", those things were like touching the ground. Just
straight up.
Just a hilarious sight. You mentioned diving on the floor too. My colleague Brent Urena, who's big on social media, he has like a photographic memory for all you guys playing. He remembers you diving. He says you like your thing at Big Ten tournaments, especially was like diving on the scorer's table. And
I did it twice.
Yeah, what's going on with that? Were you like addicted to diving into the press row or something at the Big Ten tournament? What was going on?
It was I mean, I was just playing hard. I think the one year I took out Greg Doyle from Indy Star, but it was a situation where, to me, I never really, like I tell my players now that I train and I work with, I don't really believe in lines. You got to just play and just go for it. And if you see a good opportunity to get your team an opportunity to get them a bucket, but then you also got to know time and moments of games. You got to know when your team needs a hustle play and when you can go get them one. And if you see that, you got to go and get it. But in the Big Ten tournament, I mean, both times in those situations, we needed wins. So, I mean, you just kind of go all out for your teammates. And I was that guy that, I mean, I would do anything to win a game. I would risk my body. I would jump over a table. But no, I got that picture too. It's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. And one other thing about Coach Painter, like I always tell people this, he is so sneaky, like funny. If you're not a Purdue fan, you don't hear him like every day. But, you know, whenever we do stuff with him media wise, he cracks me up. And he's like got the dry sense of humor and he'll settle in and start cracking jokes. So like, do you have any funny like Painter stories or something that makes you laugh when you think back? Because I feel like Hummel's got a million of them. I could probably tell a few just from brief interactions. Like, he's a funny guy.
Nah, he is, but I mean, Rob won a lot. So I mean, we won my last couple years. So my first 2 years, I didn't get that much from him. I mean, we last place in the Big Ten. He's not a funny dude. But no, I get what you're saying, but nah, I don't really got that many funny stories. I got a lot of good ones, but I don't know if we can tell them on air.
It's easier to have a sense of humor when you're winning. I definitely
100%.
Definitely.
No, he had a great sense of humor when we were losing, but I can't repeat that type of stuff like it.
I got you. All right, so you know, since those first couple years where like I said, Paint was not teetering, but it was rough for a little while. Purdue, I think, has consistently come out and at least exceeded national expectations. Like that's kind of the chip on their shoulder that they always have. You know, they feed off some of that doubt. This year's team is no different, right? They lose key contributors in the offseason. Painter seems to find all the right freshmen to come in, pushes all the right buttons. You know, now they're a borderline top 25 team, going to make the tournament. What have you liked about this team this year? And how do you kind of see the next month or so playing out when no team can take a night off against them now?
I mean, I like this team. The most I like about this team, because they're a young team, is the way the young and the old guys like each other. And you can really see it. Like Eric Hunter is a really big fan of Jaden Ivey. And like Travion is a really big fan of Big Ethan. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, Zach, my bad, I said Ethan. Zach. So it's like one of those things where they care about the young guys. The young guys look up to the older guys. You have guys like Brandon Newman, Mason. They're asking Eric to watch film with them when Eric was hurt and wasn't playing. So it's like they respect each other. That's first. Their locker room is good. You can see it on the court because they get in their locker room at halftime, they gel, and then they come back out and they play really well. So you can tell the locker room is good. But now it just feels like they're kind of hitting the groove. We feel like Jaden is really attacking the basket, being aggressive, kind of getting them going faster, kind of bringing that kind of Carson energy that Carson brought his freshman year. Travion obviously is really, really good. Eric is getting his groove offensively. He's been probably the best defensive player in the league to me throughout the season, kind of what he's been doing in individual guys and kind of help side defensively. But then he's kind of getting kind of comfortable into the offensive rhythm. Now you got Sasha back, and he kind of ended the game making shots, and that's what you want to see. You kind of want to see a guy in the game making shots. He may start the game the same way, but then Brandon Newland obviously can get you 30 at the drop of a hat, he can just go out there and get you 30. Then Mason's just one of those guys that knows how to play. And then Aaron Wheeler, that dunk and that shot he had in the last game, hopefully that can keep him going, because he's got it's going to be really important going into the end of February, March. We can get Aaron going. I mean, Purdue's definitely a tough out. So I like how they're playing. I like what they're doing defensively. They're going to three-point line a little bit better now to me, even though the numbers always showed they did. But against better shooting teams, they're guarding it better. They're rebounding well. And as long as they can just keep playing hard, I think they're hitting the right move at the right time.
Yeah, and Ivy's just like growing before our eyes. Those dunks he had against Nebraska were absurd. All right, last question for you, Ray. You talked about getting into sports media. I noticed, you're active on social media since I started following you. How do you kind of like stay in the conversation? Like I saw yesterday on the anniversary of the Bob Knight chair toss at Indiana Purdue. You just tweeted like I think it was something funny, like, I just need to know who went and got that chair and just had to like put it back. So, that's something I like to do, is like mix humor with, what's kind of going on seriously in the sports world. Yeah. How do you kind of stay active and engage in that conversation?
For me, that's just the honest thought I had. And I really, like, even from the start of me having a Twitter, I didn't really have Peyton didn't let us have Twitter. I didn't have a Twitter. So I started Twitter just because my fiance wasn't listening to me and I had thoughts to say. So it's like, I just had these random thoughts, and that's just kind of the common perspective. Like, who went and picked up that chair in front of 20,000 people and put it back? Like, the gym had to be quiet. You know what I mean? Like, it was awkward. So it's one of the things where I see something, I got to comment my honest opinion. And sometimes it helps you, sometimes it hurts you. But I'm very honest about what I see, and it helps that Purdue fans kind of know that. They know me from my Purdue days. They know I shoot straight from the hip. But I like to have fun with it. I don't like to be too serious about it. Because I think college basketball, those kids being that I played, I don't think fans understand the pressure of it is out there. And you a 21-year-old and the national coach of the year just threw a chair at you. I don't know how Steve Reed was, but I mean, what was going on in his head at that moment? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think people taking the concept these athletes are still kids. I mean, I know they graduated 22, but I would have been wondering that if I was on the bench, like, who's going to go get that? So, yeah.
Yeah, good perspective to keep for sure. It is easy to forget sometimes. These are just teenagers and people trying to figure things out. So, yeah, appreciate that perspective from you. Excited to see, where you take this career, man. Like, would not be surprised at all to, down the road to see you in some games here. So hopefully that ends up working out. We'll continue to follow your sports media career. Check out Ray's podcast, obviously, and we'll see you around in the sports media space, man.
Oh no, I appreciate it. I definitely look forward to it. Hopefully calling games, getting on the national stage, something I really want to do. But yeah, Boilermakers Rapheal Davis. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube, the Rapheal Davis podcast. I appreciate it. Thanks, Alex.
All right, everyone, check it out. We'll talk soon, Ray. All right, thanks as always to our guests. Thanks to Ray for jumping on. Really appreciate him peeling back the curtain a little bit on Purdue basketball. We've had plenty of their former players and personalities on now, and it's fun to always talk to them because the culture is so instilled. You always learn something new every time, but every conversation has similar themes. So whether it's Ryan Klein or Rapheal Davis or whoever we have on, Dakota Mathias we've had on a couple times over the years. Painter's done a great job with them, just molding them into the players and people they become, and always love learning more about Purdue. And look right now where they are. People counted them out this year, and they're right there, maybe contending for a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament, top 4 finish in a extremely competitive Big Ten. So Purdue basketball keeps on rolling, keeps on chugging, however you want to do the train pun. But appreciate Ray for jumping on. All right, we will get to Big Ten Network Manager of Research Harold Shelton next. If you're unfamiliar with the show, Harold jumps on pretty much every episode during football and basketball season to talk about what's going on in football and basketball. Obviously, right now, talking exclusively hoops. And we get into plenty about the Big Ten top 4 to 6 teams, especially talk about Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois. Talk about Io versus Luka debate, whatever that debate is, there's still left to discuss. And talked quite a bit about Michigan State's upset over Illinois as well, since Harold went to Michigan State. And as I bring up roughly 12 times per episode, I went to Illinois. So definitely get a little deeper into that matchup, and I take Harold's gloating, as I deserve the morning after a loss from my alma mater. So fun discussion coming up. We'll toss it over now to H and get right into it. All right, very pleased to be joined as usual by Harold Shelton, Big Ten Network Manager of Research. Harold, it's been a couple weeks. All of a sudden we look up, we got less than 2 weeks left in the Big Ten regular season. How are you hanging in?
It's kind of similar to football, where you kind of get through the dog days, and then all of a sudden you look up and there's 2 weeks left, and you kind of get re-energized a little bit because you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is when it gets its most fun, like the storylines start to come to a head and the races start happening. And so, we're looking forward to teams trying to battle their way in and teams trying to solidify top seeds, double byes, all that kind of stuff's all in play now.
Yeah, there's been a lot packed into these last 4 months. I think it was 4 months ago today that Big Ten football started. It seems like an eternity and like last week all kind of at the same time. So you're right about looking up and kind of seeing the light here. And I'm it's my favorite time of year. I'm so excited for March Madness, especially being deprived of it last year. So I'm in a good mood today. Sun's shining, can't really complain.
Yeah, we kind of we had a deep freeze for most of February, and now we're thawing out quite a bit. It's never thought I'd be so happy to see puddles on the ground, but considering it was pretty much ice for most of the month, I'll take this in a heartbeat. 45 degrees, I'll live with it.
For sure. It's like, yeah, it feels like summer out. People are walking, they're wearing shorts. It's real nice out here in the Midwest. H, before we, get to the uncomfortable conversation of me taking my medicine as an Illinois alum for Tuesday night's game, let's start with this new trend I'm trying to develop here on the podcast, where we start the conversation talking about the opening guest. So we had Rapheal Davis on. I remember him as a lockdown defender on Purdue, a guy who kind of rode the second upswing of that Matt Painter era that really hasn't ever reached those depths that he had in his freshman and sophomore year. When Ray was there, they missed the tournament 2 years in a row, and it was kind of the first question mark for that Purdue era under Matt Painter, and now they've really got things straightened out. So what do you remember about his career, that era of Purdue basketball, and just overall Davis as a player?
When I think of Purdue, especially those years, they haven't done it as much recently, but those years I always thought about guys who were in your face, on the ball defenders. And he certainly fit that mold. He was a guy, basically would just try to erase one wing. You put him on your best offensive player, and more often than not, he was going to win that matchup. But he could shoot it too. I vividly remember a game against Michigan State in 2016 in West Lafayette. And, Michigan State was riding high. And Purdue came out, punched him right in the mouth, went up 20. He went crazy. I want to say he hit 6 threes or so. And then Michigan State wound up battling back, forcing OT, and it was kind of him and Denzel Valentine going back and forth, and Purdue winds up winning the game. And then they face off again in the Big Ten championship game final in 2016, and Michigan State winds up beating them. But, Rapheal Davis kind of solidified what I think about Purdue, just tough, in-your-face, hard-nosed, like won't back down from a challenge. And, credit to Matt Painter and him and those guys from that class to kind of bounce the program back up to what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, he talked about that and how it's such a pride thing for him personally, but also like that program. Like, this dude's not going to beat me. I'm not going to let this freshman like D'Angelo Russell come in and punk me. It really is a mindset, and it seems like, sometimes when I hear the PR machine turning for Purdue, it seems like every year they have a defensive player of the year candidate. because like they get that narrative going, but it's not just like PR. It's real. Like they churn out these guys. They mold defenders, and they mold Big Ten Defensive Player of the Years and all defensive players. And there's a reason why every year, Dan Dockich he always is the one to call it out, is saying this person's the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no doubt. And I couldn't have said it better, and I'm sure Rapheal Davis couldn't have said it better. He's a guy that, he took it personal. He took on the challenge. He loved being that guy to say, okay, whether it's D'Angelo Russell, whether it's Denzel, whether it was whatever wing or guard, that was the best on the opposing team. He took it upon himself to try to just eliminate him from the game. And, you got to love guys like that, because that shows how selfless they are. And, if they happen to score too, so be it, but they're more than fine just winning that one-on-one matchup, because it allows the team to do what they need to do to win.
For sure. And all right, I put it off long enough now. We can talk about the Michigan State-Illinois game Tuesday night. The Spartans smacked Illinois. Speaking of getting punched in the mouth and getting up by almost 20, that's exactly what happened. It was a 5-0 lead for Illinois, and then Michigan State decided that they kind of like they did against Indiana, except in a much more compressed time frame, that they want to get to the tournament. And some of these upperclassmen like Aaron Henry and Josh Langford aren't playing around anymore. They're hooping now. Henry's been brilliant. Langford pops off for a career 16 boards and get like 15 points to go on top of that. So what did you see besides, what I saw, which is like really good scout game plan, make Illinois uncomfortable, be physical with Kofi, get Io out of his rhythm as far as making him shoot jump shots and make him go left. What did you see in that one? And were you surprised, beyond obviously the final score, at how effective that strategy was?
I was surprised at the margin. I never thought I'd see them up, mostly double digits the entire second half. There's no way I saw that coming. I think they found something against Indiana. I think Izzo, for the longest time, and I know he alluded to it early in the year, of how he didn't want to, kind of be at a detriment if COVID hit and one of their players was out. And so he was cycling through the lineup, and he was always playing 12 guys. But I feel like no one was able to get in a rhythm when that happened. And so, guys would make a mistake, get pulled, put in the next guy. He'd make a mistake, get pulled. And so for the longest time, like, guys just never got in the rhythm. And it seemed like Aaron Henry was the only guy who would consistently play a ton of minutes. Against Indiana, he pretty much just went small. He said, Malik Hall, goodbye. Hauser, you're limited. We're going to play Rocket Watts, Langford, Gabe Brown at the 3, Aaron Henry at the 4, and then just kind of rotate the center position. And that seemed to work. And he let all those guys play 30-ish minutes. And I think Henry played 40 against Indiana. Against Illinois, it was the same thing. Henry played 39. The other 3 guards all played over 30, and they pretty much just rotated the center position. And I feel like they've kind of found something with this, and it's allowed them to be tougher. It's allowed them to eliminate mistakes on defense, because they just have their best guys in, their most athletic guys in. They're just going to sink or swim with that. And, now they don't have to worry about, a point guard taking Foster Loyer off the dribble, or someone just being stronger than Joey Hauser. And they seem to just kind of have found a rhythm, found a lineup that works for them. And we'll see if that's enough to take them back in the tournament where they're used to being.
Yeah, for those who are listening who are unfamiliar, Harold is a proud Michigan State alum. So, always want to talk Spartans, especially when they do something impressive like they did against the Illini. And do you think Michigan State now, with the rest of the schedule how it is, it's very tough, and tournament hopes on the line, what do you think their chances are of getting an at-large bid?
They've got life now. I think they still have a lot of work to do. We talked about the schedule. You get Michigan twice. You got Ohio State coming up this week. You're at Maryland. You're home against Indiana. I think if you win 3 of those and don't lose the first game of the Big Ten tournament, I actually think they're in. But we're talking about 3 matchups against top 5 teams, and we're talking about, a game against Maryland, who's been surging. So it's not going to be easy, at all. But I think, the fact that they're playing so well right now, they kind of have that, we don't want to let this tournament streak die. We don't want Joshua Langford to go out like this. Like, he didn't miss 2 years to come out and miss the tournament. So I think like the 16 boards you saw from him against Illinois, the improved play from him, as Stephen Bardo would say, guys get senioritis. And I think that's certainly the case with Langford as a guy who is seeing his Michigan State time, come pretty close to an end. And I think he's just leaving it all out there and becoming more of a leader. And we saw that against Illinois. We saw it in the second half against Indiana, and we'll see if it continues.
Did any of the Illinois tendencies trouble you at all? On one hand, they'd won 7 in a row, so every team's due for a letdown unless you're Baylor or Gonzaga, apparently. And even Baylor almost took the upset crown away on Tuesday night by struggling with Iowa State after that long COVID pause. But, on one hand, I look at it and it's like, yeah, Illinois was due for a loss. On the other hand, it's like during that 7-game win streak, they really played with fire. They almost lost to Nebraska, could have lost to Northwestern, tend to play down to their competition or up to their competition. Clearly have the ability to blow teams out by 20 and 30, but also, go quiet and completely get taken out of games sometimes. And I just don't know what side I fall on as far as, yeah, this team will be fine in March, because I could also see something like last night happening where they never get in a rhythm and, Coburn can't hit free throws, Io is not efficient, and, Frazier's, I think Frazier makes me feel better because he's been really consistent scoring the ball lately and has been a great third option. But those wing positions at Illinois, they're undersized, and they get bothered by longer athletic guards and swing players like Aaron Henry. So, obviously any Big Ten team could get popped in the first or second round. I don't know how you feel though, as far as if last night kind of exposed some concerns for a potential 2-3 seed, outside shot at a 1 in Illinois.
I was actually talking to a couple of my buddies about this like a week ago, and I think Illinois has the highest ceiling of any team in the Big Ten, but I think they are less safe to get to the second weekend than a Michigan or an Ohio State or even an Iowa, because to your point, I think they do play to the level of competition. We've seen them struggle against Northwestern a couple of different times and had to pull games out of the fire, whether it was a rally from a big first half deficit or having to hold off the Wildcats because Io, does what Io does. And we've seen it against Nebraska, and, Io had to put the Superman cape on to get them out of that. But we've seen them at their peak, and, we've seen them destroy Minnesota. And, that team, like, that's the one where, Kofi's a monster. They got guys making threes. Io can be more of a distributor and get everybody involved, and he doesn't have to put the Superman cape on. I think that's when they're at their best, is when they don't need Io to be like that. I just think that, if they're a 2 or a 3 seed, they get a frisky 7-6 seed in the second round. If they wind up playing down to them, I wouldn't be shocked if they lost. But I think if they get to the second weekend and they start facing teams that are more talented than them, I think mentally they'll be able to turn that on and be ready to go. But they kind of played into what we've seen. Like, they'll play down to the level, and, they might have saw, even though it's Michigan State, it's not the Michigan State we're used to seeing. So it might have been, hey, we're riding high, they're in 11th place, we'll just come in here and get a win. And, before you know it, they got punched in the mouth and down double digits and got frustrated.
Yeah, I almost think it's inevitable at this point. They're going to struggle with a 14-15 seed, and then potentially, 10, 9, 8, 7, and then if they make it that far, blow like a Virginia Tech or a Tennessee out in the Sweet 16 or something. So like that just seems like it's the kind of team that they are, like you said, volatile but also very high ceiling. So we'll have to see. Again, like, teams lose after 7-game winning streaks. Not too concerned, but definitely frustrating for a team that wanted to win the Big Ten title. Had a chance, and still technically has a chance, but after Tuesday night's result, Michigan now is firmly in the driver's seat. If they weren't before, they put on a clinic against Ohio State. That was such an awesome game. I was by myself on my couch watching, like, emoting, like letting out, yelps when they would make difficult shot after difficult shot, back and forth. I almost forgot there weren't fans there. Like, it was an awesome college basketball game between Michigan and Ohio State. And those two teams have, I think, what maybe outside of Iowa, no one else in the Big Ten has, just like endless shot makers. Like, those teams can create, execute, and hit shots 1 through 5 essentially. So one, any reflections on that game, just because it probably was the game of the year in the Big Ten, and what does it mean going forward for both teams outside of Michigan, looking like they just need to handle business and have that Big Ten crown locked up?
Like you said, I mean, it seemed like a heavyweight fight. Ohio State, hit them with a big punch early. Michigan would rally back. They would just kind of jab each other for a while. Here comes a haymaker. Here comes a response. I mean, it was great. Up until the last minute, the game was pretty much played within 11 point window, with Ohio State never leading by more than 6 and Michigan never leading by more than 5. But I think Michigan's depth and size was just too much for Ohio State. And I think Ohio State could face an issue potentially if they face a team with a big who's got some real size. I mean, as much as E.J. Liddell and Kyle Young are ballers and are tough, 6'7" and 6'8", it's hard to match up with 6'10", 7 feet. And so, I think on the glass late in the game, Hunter Dickinson, just the continuous body blows he was giving them throughout the game just kind of allowed for, that Michigan size to kind of take over late. A lot of offensive rebounds from Wagner and Shawnee Brown and Livers, guys like that. I think Michigan they seem almost matchup proof at this point. I'd be really, really shocked if we didn't see them at least in the Elite Eight at this point. Ohio State, I think offensively they're great. We've talked about, top 5 team offensively, efficiency-wise, and probably one of the best offensive teams they've had in the last 10 years. But defensively, they still leave a little bit to be desired, and I think that was the issue against Michigan late.
Yeah, and I think with the pause that Michigan had to undergo, we kind of didn't forget, but needed to be reminded just how great they've been, and how impressive it's been for them to have this season essentially in what was supposed to be not a rebuilding year, but maybe a step back. Especially with the recruiting classes that Howard's expected to bring in. This wasn't supposed to be the year, but it's looking like it definitely could be. And I don't know. It's been just interesting to be reminded just how good they are. And I think Sunday was the first time that since they beat Wisconsin over a month ago that we were kind of just appreciate what Michigan's done.
Yeah, I mean, I think, despite the fact that they got all these, great recruits coming in, they're an experienced team. And I think this year we've seen the experienced teams rise to the top. They completely hid in the transfer portal with Mike Smith and Shawnee Brown. You got 2 seniors there. Livers has been through the wars. Eli Brooks has been through the wars. Wagner's been through the wars. And so there's something to be said for guys who have experience and have, been in those big time battles. And, the fact that Livers flirted with going to the NBA, decided to come back, and then they hit on those 2 guys in Smith and Brown, it makes them just so much more well-rounded. And then you add, the freshman talent of Dickinson in there, and you get a complete package. And that's what the Wolverines have. I mean, there's a reason why they're top 5, offensive and defensive efficiency in the country. And those guys love playing for Juwan. It's completely evident in how they play. They play really, really hard. It's almost like looking at, a past Izzo team, like the way that, how hard they play, how tough they play, how smart they play, and the shot making from everywhere.
Yeah, they're relentless. So I know you talked about their floor likely maybe being a Elite Eight berth. Seems like there's at least 4 teams in the Big Ten that could, have a good case for an Elite Eight. Iowa would be my other pick. But those have kind of been the favorites for the top 4 seeds, 4 teams we talked about, or 3 teams we talked about plus Iowa. But the double bye and the number 4 seed is still in play for, 5 or 6 teams. So Purdue sneaking up here. They've done a magnificent job. Again, I remember maybe a month and a half ago, I was like, can we sleep on Purdue finally? Or, they were struggling and you said, no, don't do it. And every year, I never learned my lesson. not that I like doubted them, but I did not expect them, I don't think, to be this good this early with these freshmen. And then Wisconsin's still lurking out there as well. So what are the scenarios? Do you think the top four remains as it is with Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, and Iowa, or can Wisconsin get right a little bit, and can Purdue sneak in and grab double bye? And again, what was supposed to be a reset year, or maybe a step back for them, and they've done what Painter does and just rolled right along.
I actually think Purdue, of the teams that aren't in the double bye conversation, like not currently in the top four, I think they have the best chance to finish their closing stretch of Penn State on the road, and then Wisconsin and Indiana at home. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they won all three of those. I think Iowa and Wisconsin certainly have tougher schedules. So I wouldn't be shocked if Iowa, possibly fell to 5. And if that does happen, how does that affect the player of the year race with Garza and Io? I think that's still to be determined, even though I think Garza kind of extended his lead over the last, 7 days or so. Iowa, I mean, just the schedule they have, they're at Michigan, they're at Ohio State, they got Wisconsin at home. They have Nebraska in there as well. So, I mean, they should win that one. But if they're 2-2, I could certainly see them falling behind Purdue. And I know Wisconsin, they still have a tough stretch, facing Purdue and Iowa on the road their last 2 games, and they still get the game with Illinois coming up over the weekend. So, I think Purdue probably sits in the best case here in terms of finishing in the top 4. I think Illinois and Ohio State are probably the other 2 teams that get there, but I see Purdue jumping Iowa in terms of locking up a spot for Friday.
All right, I know at one point in the season, especially when like 9 Big Ten teams were ranked or whatever it was, we were talking about 10, 11 Big Ten teams in the tournament. That's looking a little optimistic at this point, I think. Maryland, credit to them. They've done a great job. They're just so tough. Like they kind of go 1 through 5 with all these gritty type of guys who between 6'3" and 6'7". I've enjoyed watching them play because they play hard. Rutgers is kind of hard to figure out, but I think they should be safe. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then we talked about Michigan State, and Indiana's right on the brink as well, and so is Minnesota. So how do you see this playing out? How many teams do you think will ultimately make the NCAA tournament? I know what happens in Indy could determine that in the Big Ten tournament. But where do we kind of stand with that other tier of teams that are hovering right now?
So, I mean, we're sort of 6 locks now, right? With Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State, Iowa, Purdue, Wisconsin. I think Maryland and Rutgers, I wouldn't call them locks, but I think if it ended today, they're safely in. Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan State, I think are kind of fighting at this point. The good news is that you can't really have a bad loss in this league. And so, the fact that, and they also have opportunities to get quality wins as well, just because pretty much every team you play is going to be a quad 1 or quad 2 game. I think Minnesota's got some issues. Liam Robbins has been hurt, and you can see how that's affected them. Gabe Kosher broke his hand. He's been one of the best defenders in the league. So there's just a lot of weight on Marcus Carr right now. And, they've kind of gone in this free fall, and they can't win away from the barn. And so that's been a huge issue. The good news for them is that their closing stretch is, compared to everybody else, is relatively soft. You get Northwestern, Nebraska, Penn State, and Rutgers, so you don't have a ranked team the rest of the way. They played an extremely front-loaded schedule. So I think if they win 3 of those, they're probably back on the right side of the bubble. I think Indiana, it's a weird situation. I think a win over Michigan State on Saturday would have felt, a lot better. But now you're at Rutgers Wednesday. You got both Michigan schools and you got Purdue. I think if you win 2 of those, you're probably feeling okay. If you only win 1, you got major work to do at Lucas Oil. And we kind of went over Michigan State already. I think they need to win 3 or 4. So all that said, I'm going to go with 9 teams in, which would be a record for the Big Ten. And, outside shot at 10, but I'm going to go with 9 right now.
All right, sounds good. You touched on it briefly. I think we do have to discuss the Io versus Luka Garza Player of the Year discussion. It's really hot in the streets on social media right now. Like, Instagram comments. We got teenagers arguing back and forth over each other on Twitter. We got millennials arguing, in the replies. So what do we think? Also, I've loved this year kind of how, and this is just like kind of a personal observation, but how it started with Iowa and Illinois fans chirping before the season started. Then Michigan fans got annoyed with Illinois fans because Illinois kind of got bored with Iowa fans, I think, and turned their attention to Michigan, especially after the scheduling, discussion happened with Michigan deciding to postpone that game after the COVID pause. So there's been, all kinds of chirping back and forth, and there's now like a three-way just Twitter slinging fest going on with Illinois, Michigan, and Iowa. Illinois fans have kind of become the heel, which has been amusing to observe from afar. After I just think they're kind of enjoying being relevant again and maybe taking it a little too far. But it's amusing, and I think once the NCAA tournament gets here, as it always does, the fans will all kind of lock arms, unite, and cheer for each other for the greater good. But that's just an aside. But it's really spilled over into this Io versus Luka debate. So where do you fall on it? And I agree. I think this week is kind of, or at least Tuesday night, definitely reestablished a bit of a gulf between Luka leading and Io falling back to maybe that Jared Butler pack with his struggles against Michigan State.
Yeah, I thought Io had a lot of momentum after the Nebraska game. Basically saving them from what would have been a bad loss. And that was around the same time that Iowa was struggling. They were, they had just lost to Indiana for the second time, and that was on the heels of losing against Ohio State. And I think the argument was if Illinois could, contend for the Big Ten title and Iowa was kind of, 6th, 7th in the Big Ten, could you really give National Player of the Year or even Big Ten Player of the Year to a guy whose team wasn't that great in their own league? But now Iowa's won 4 in a row. He's played really well. He had the monster game against Wisconsin, broke the scoring record against Penn State. And so, he's up to his usual. And, Iowa kind of falling back and Illinois falling back. Iowa now has a better record than Illinois, and Garza, in all the counting stats that everybody loves, he's pretty much ahead in all of them except assists. So I think, Iowa had closed it for a bit, but I think it's opened back up. And I think if Iowa can wind up beating Michigan or Ohio State and he has a monster game there, I think he can lock it up.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think, like I said, it's really hard to have an off night when all eyes are on you and then still come back and make that case like Iowa had against Michigan State. He didn't play well, like we all know that. If he goes on a tear at the very end of the season here, maybe the discussion heats back up again. But we'll have to see. It's been fun. It's been fun to follow. I feel like when somebody's in the lead, like Luka has been for the whole season, and had such a great junior season, that naturally there's going to be whispers of another contender, whether it comes from within the Big Ten or beyond for National Player of the Year. That's just how that's how elections go, right? Like there's a front runner, and then the media will go, well, what about this candidate? So it's been fun to follow. It's been good for the league, especially. I think it's been awesome to just generate social media conversations. So blessed to have 2 great players for sure in the league, and it's been fun to follow. A great year of Big Ten basketball this year. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. Don't know how soon just yet, but we'll talk again for sure before the season's over. Definitely talk some March Madness. But it's been fun, condensing what usually for us is, August to April, about 7 to 8 months of content into 4 or 5 here. And, it's been a lot, but it's been, much better than the alternative, which was for a while no sports.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that, and these games, that were getting postponed in, January and February, you're all getting added now. And so you got teams playing, 5 or 6 games in 10 or 12 days, and it's kind of NBA schedule. And, every other day a team's playing. And so, and I think the schedule was really backloaded, and it became even more so after the postponements and the reschedules, because you got, you still got Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, all still having to play against each other in some way or shape or form. And so we still got a lot of great games coming up in these last 2 weeks. And even though I think the title race is done, I think we're still just going to get a lot of high quality basketball. And, it should be a lot of fun trying to figure out, who's going to get those other 3 double byes, because Michigan, is kind of out in front at this point.
For sure. Looking forward to it. We'll get back with you soon, H, and thanks as always for all the help this season.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right, thanks as always to Harold and Rapheal Davis for joining the show. Really fun stuff as always. Like I mentioned, we always have good stuff from Purdue guys. Harold is an excellent interview every time. He volunteers his time to share his insight. He can really, really get to the bones of what's happening, really distill down what we see on a Big Ten basketball and football field. Does it better than a lot of the experts and pros you see on TV. Give this man his own show. Get Harold on air. I'm gonna start like an internal campaign here to get him on air. But for now, he's on the podcast, and I'm glad to have him. So appreciate it, H, and appreciate everyone for listening, obviously, as well. It's been a weird season, weird schedule. Made it nearly to the end now. Definitely intend on putting out a couple more episodes before college basketball wraps up, and honestly might ramp up the episode frequency a little more once we get out of this season, out of this college basketball season. Just have a little more free time, and people will be more available, and we have to hit a certain amount before the end of the year. So we intend on ramping up that production. And appreciate people for following along when these episodes do come out. I have to shout out my edit team as well. Julie Bronder, especially for stitching the show together. So thanks as always. Reminder before we hop off, you can find the show on every platform where podcasts are normally consumed. Your Apple Podcasts, of course, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Big Ten Network YouTube channel. Since the COVID era and the Zoom era, we've put all these interviews on YouTube, on video. So if you're listening right now and you're more of a visual person, hop on over to YouTube, Big Ten Network's channel, subscribe to that, and then search the Take 10 podcast playlist to find all these interviews on video. All right. With that, we'll wrap up another episode of the Take 10 podcast. Thanks as always to everyone involved, and we'll talk to you very soon.